just found out the reason why most Latin Americans are poor. And no, this is not some random theory I came up with or something I just read on a thread. The truth was buried in a forgotten video from 1998. And honestly, it might be more powerful than every economics book out there. It's not because we're less capable or ambitious. It's because of something much deeper and far more uncomfortable. A man born to see what others missed. On June 30th, 1930, in the United States, a man named Thomas Sowell was born. He would grow up to become one of the most important economic thinkers of the 20th century. This is a man who challenged the mainstream and didn't care about being politically correct, and had a talent for seeing what others missed. He's an economist, a social theorist, a political commentator, and the author of over 30 books. And during one interview, he said something most people completely ignored. Maybe because it was too controversial, or maybe it hit too close to home. The Spanish legacy that never left. See, in this discussion, Thomas Sowell didn't just guess why Latin America continues to struggle economically. He exposed it, and what he said would probably make a lot of people uncomfortable. He didn't blame colonization or capitalism, nor did he point fingers at the usual suspects like bad leadership or corruption. Instead, he blamed something far more powerful. Something that endures through centuries. And honestly, it can't be fixed by any government from the outside. Culture. You see, he argued that one of the most overlooked reasons Latin America has struggled for so long, even after gaining independence from Spain, is the cultural legacy we inherited from the Spanish Empire. And before you say, oh, that's just his opinion, understand that Sowell is a scholar who backs his arguments with historical data and concrete real-life examples.
So that if you look at the history of Spanish offshoot societies in the Western Hemisphere, you find them not being very good in those particular areas.
See, he pointed out that the Spanish Empire had a very unique approach to power and wealth, unlike other empires that built systems, industries, and a long-term infrastructure. They focused heavily on extracting resources like gold and silver poured into Spain from Latin America, so much so that they became filthy rich on paper. But here's the problem. That wealth wasn't earned through production, innovation, or commerce. It was extracted. And as a result, it created a mindset, a cultural pattern that looked down on the world. Yes, really. In Sowell's words, Spanish culture came to disdain commerce and manual labor, instead prioritizing wealth that came from shortcuts, not systems. And when Spain colonized Latin America, they brought the same mindset.
I have argued that this is a culture which, one, disdains commerce, disdains manual labor.
A way of thinking that values status over service, gold over hard work, and appearances over production. Even when the Spanish Empire collapsed, that mindset, well, it didn't vanish. It stayed and it spread. It became deeply embedded in how people viewed work, time, and ambition. We didn't know it back then, but that mentality would eventually ruin us, what immigrant cultures have proven. But let me show you why this isn't just some random theory. Sowell talks about how throughout Latin America, immigrant groups from other parts of the world, like Germany or Japan, came in and often outperformed the local population. And not because they were better or smarter, but because they brought with them a different cultural software. They didn't share the same disdain for manual labor or commerce. They valued time and discipline and believed in creating industries. See, this mindset would set our societies apart for generations. And we've seen this pattern repeat itself over and over again. The power of mindset. In southern Brazil, for example, German immigrants built entire industries from scratch. They introduced systems and methods that didn't exist before they arrived. Japanese immigrants in Paraguay brought with them an entirely different work ethic. They were so efficient and punctual that the locals were genuinely confused. Sowell recalls, when the Japanese expected a train to arrive at 9 a.m., they shocked to see it arrive 20 minutes late. With the engineer casually chatting with villagers along the way, what seemed normal to the locals, taking your time, being flexible with schedules, and slowing down to enjoy life, that just seemed unthinkable to the Japanese. That difference in how people see time alone created massive gaps in productivity and development. Just look at Japan. They literally got nuked twice and still managed to rebuild cities like Hiroshima and Nagasaki into something better than even before. Meanwhile, we can even get our water pipes to stop leaking or build roads that don't fall apart after one rainy season. So that says a lot about us. Then look at how quickly Europe was rebuilt after becoming the battlefield of 2 world wars. Compared to us, they are miles ahead. Now, before you get upset with this 94-year-old grandpa, let me make it clear. He wasn't trying to shame anybody. What he wanted to do was to highlight a deeper issue. If we've never asked ourselves why these patterns persist, we'll just keep repeating them. To Sowell, culture isn't something that stays frozen in time. It's not about genetics, race, or where you were born. Culture is something that's passed down, not inherited. Just like people can pass down trauma, traditions, or language, they can also pass down attitudes about work, money, time, and success. That's why culture is far more powerful than any government program. It shapes how people see the world, how they raise their children, and how they built or failed to build their economies. According to Sowell, people don't just bring their clothes and suitcases when they migrate. They bring an entire worldview. So don't be too hard on yourself for being poor. You have been programmed to think that way. But here's the good news. You can change it. And how? Well, by joining the only online community that doesn't just sit around and complain all day, but takes massive action instead. All you gotta do is press the big subscribe button. And by the way, guys, for every like, my dogs, they get a little treat. How old ideas stay alive in new lands. Here's where it gets really interesting. Sowell talks about how cultural worldviews don't just vanish when people move. They actually stick around in new places even after they fade away in the old ones. Now, don't just look at me like I'm crazy, because I'm going to break it down for you in a second. In the interview, Sowell explains that people from different parts of Europe didn't just migrate to America. They specifically went to certain regions. For example, New England or Virginia. And over time, these little cultural pockets, these mini worldviews got passed down generation after generation. So people who settled in New England were totally different from those who went down south. They spoke differently, raised their kids differently, and built their towns differently. And you know what? Those differences over time made a massive impact on economic outcomes. It also led to things like racism, wars, and all of that. But hey, that's just for another video. Back to Sowell's point. Cultural traits can die down where they originated, but they stick around where they get moved to. For example, he talks about how certain speech patterns and accents disappeared in England but stuck in southern US for decades. Eventually they'd faded, but not before influencing how people lived, worked, and communicated. This just shows how powerful cultural inheritance really is. Not because it's right or wrong, but because it sticks. And if nobody questions it, it just keeps going. If we don't face it, we can't fix it. So now, you get what I mean when I say that Latin America's economic issues go way deeper than colonialism, capitalism, or the latest corrupt politician? Yeah, those things matter, but they're just symptoms of a much bigger issue. So the real problem is cultural, a set of beliefs that have been passed down for centuries about work, time, ambition, wealth, and status. That's why even centuries with the same or better resources still fall behind. It's not just about what's buried beneath the surface. It's about what's in the people's minds. Is Latin America doomed? Now, let's be crystal clear here. Sowell isn't saying that Latin Americans are doomed. He's not saying change isn't possible. In fact, his whole point is that culture can evolve. It has before and it can do it again. But first, you've got to face the truth. You've got to admit that not everything is someone else's fault. Maybe, just maybe, the enemy isn't always out there. Sometimes is the enemy within. They don't teach this in schools, and it's definitely not trending on TikTok or Twitter, but it might be the most important idea if you really want to understand why Latin America is struggling while places like the United States or Canada, they keep it growing and they keep evolving, because without cultural change, economic change won't last, and without self-awareness, history just keeps repeating itself. So next time someone asks why Latin America is still behind while the US or Canada keeps moving forward, maybe don't point to the latest scandal or precedent or conspiracy theory. Instead, start asking harder questions, like what kind of culture are we building? And more importantly, what kind of culture are we handing down? Once you understand that, you'll finally grasp the truth that Thomas Sowell revealed in 1998. And you won't need a single economics textbook to see it. Now, it's your responsibility to help more people find the hidden truth. So, what I'm asking from you is, please share this video. Or you can just stay silent, just like everybody else. This is Chris, Bad Hombres TV. I'll see you next time.